Beast and I, well, perhaps me to a greater extent, have wanted to share our thoughts about the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy and TV shows for a long time.
So we thought to ourselves, what's a better place to do that than in a random YouTube video on the internet?
My original plan was to start with The Hidden World because it's the most controversial movie of the trilogy and also the one that I personally have the most to say about. However, I think that it's important to start at the very beginning and work our way through all the movies chronologically. So let's dive in. I'm going to assume that everyone watching this video has seen How to Train Your Dragon, but if you haven't for some weird, unknown reason, please go watch it for yourself before getting spoiled.
With that being said, this is your official spoiler warning.
For a bit of context, How to Train Your Dragon the movie is based on the very aptly named book series How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell. Whether or not the books or the movies are better is strongly debated between the two fandoms, but I'm one of the few who likes both.
They're just good in different ways.
Quite honestly, they are so different that you can only compare character personalities and the endings, so I won't even bother trying here besides a basic analysis. Perhaps that's for a future video? But anyway, the movie was released in 2010 by DreamWorks and was directed by Dean DeBlois and Chris Sanders. I'm gonna be honest, I can't even remember if I saw this movie in theaters since I was less than 8 years old at the time of its release, but I saw it at some point after.
We saw it for the first time at home, remember? We rented it from Blockbuster or Redbox or something and watched it at home. Unfortunately, I didn't really like it during that first watch, but I gained a much better appreciation for it after rewatching it for the first time a few years later.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I do remember that we definitely liked it enough to rewatch it about 100 times while we were in the car as kids.
Yeah, we had a little portable DVD player for a while, and then our mom got a car that had one of those built-in screens with Bluetooth headphones. Many a road trip was spent watching How to Train Your Dragon media.
And many a road trip was time well spent. My favorite scene was always split between Test Drive, Forbidden Friendship, and Romantic Flight. We also watched the Defenders of Burke episodes more times than I can count. I do remember seeing How to Train Your Dragon 2 in theaters, which was then also added to the rewatch list in the car.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it in theaters, but when North came home, she could not stop gushing about it.
Yes, I was ecstatic to see it in theaters. However, my obsession with the trilogy really began when we found this funny little show called Race to the Edge on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend the watch. Since then, I've been obsessed with all things How to Train Your Dragon, from the books to the TV shows to the comics, and, of course, watching other YouTubers talk about the trilogy or reading online opinions. And yes, that includes things they don't like. So let's take a look and see. Are the common complaints about this movie actually valid? Alright, like I said earlier, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. In my opinion, the books are great. Despite being a kids' series, Cressida Cowell does not stray away from making each book darker than the last. I won't spoil anything, but there are character deaths, betrayal, selflessness, and the ending is actually really similar to the end of the movie trilogy. Ahem. More on that in a future video. Yes, this was the first book series I can remember that made us both cry bittersweet tears at the end.
Yeah, the ending pretty much emotionally wrecked us.
Pulling back to the big picture, though, I'm gonna be completely honest. The book series would not have made a good movie. Not only are there 13 books with way too much plot to cover, but they simply wouldn't make an appealing story to see on the big screen. The original directors of How to Train Your Dragon stumbled into this struggle before Dean and Chris came along.
This is actually why we see relics of the original story in the movie, such as the Terrible Terrors, Toothless's original design, character names and personalities, and also some dragon names.
Yep, the shows even bring in Alvin the Treacherous, a key antagonist of the books, although in a very different way. I don't think Cartoon Network was allowed to scare the kids with the character that looks like, well, this. All jokes aside, the books and the movies are too different to fairly compare. I do feel for the book lovers who wanted a faithful adaptation, but DreamWorks tried that originally and majorly failed with test audiences. Plus, we were able to get a phenomenal adaptation, not copy of, The story that took the characters we loved and used them in exciting, new, and insightful ways. Trust me, nobody will ever take away Hiccup's wit and sarcasm.
Well, except maybe this guy. We'll get to you another time.
So while I would love to see a TV series made of the books someday, let's be real, you couldn't fit all 13 very necessary books into a movie. I don't think it's fair to say How to Train Your Dragon the movie is bad just because it deviates from the plot of the books. Reminder, unlike some modern shows that were supposed to be faithful adaptations of the books and weren't,
Ahem.
DreamWorks was very honest with viewers that this movie would be nothing like the original stories. Well, that's my thought on this particular complaint, and we'd be curious to know in the comments. Do you prefer the original books? The movies? Do you like both? And if so, why? I want to quickly address the complaint of cultural inaccuracies related to Vikings. I'm no history buff, but I am aware that they took stereotypes and ran with them. I'm also not from that culture, so I can't say whether or not this is offensive. However, I'm going to say this once for all the people in the back. This is a fictional movie set in a fantasy world with giant fire breathing lizards. It is absolutely not fair to judge the movie based on this critique. I honestly think it adds to the charm, such as the Viking kids speaking in stereotypical English while the adults speak with Scottish accents.
The stylistic choice for this was really interesting from the standpoint of the adults and the kids being from different generations, too. It subtly highlights that the younger generation is the one responsible for bringing about change.
I'm pretty sure Dean was actually poking fun at this in the Christmas special Homecoming, where Hiccup's son, Nothink, is literally the only kid in the entire show, at least that I'm aware of, to have a Scottish accent.
Maybe he learned it from Gobber.
Huh, hard to say. Another one of my favorite moments is in The Hidden World when Toughnut claims the world is round because the stars and the moon are round, while Hiccup and the others laugh at him in Flat Earther. This is a fun little jab at the stereotypical Viking beliefs that I honestly think adds to the amusement of the movies. Same with how physically tough they are, although that adds more to Hiccup's story than you may think. I know I said you can't really compare the books to the movies, but I will note that the Vikings in the books had way more stereotypes than in the movies. So if you're fine with the books but bugged by the movies, I don't know what to tell ya. Yeah, in my opinion, any jokes made in the movie are really more so at the expense of individual characters than the culture as a whole. Overall, they kept the Scandinavian appearance both with character designs and landscaping, so that complaint can be wiped away too. I think the biggest thing that they didn't include was how the Vikings would pillage other tribes. But considering that's the dragons' job in the first movie, I think it turned that stereotype on its head in a really fun way. Isn't it ironic that the Vikings, who were widely feared for their intense and often deadly pillaging and plundering, were being pillaged and plundered themselves instead?
Oh, that's a good point. I never thought of that before.
With that out of the way, let's move on to some more interesting topics. Oh boy, this is a tough one, and I honestly debated whether or not it was worth going over. However, some of what I talk about here is likely going to bleed into the next section, so I think it's worthy to address the issue. I will also note up front that since this movie was released, the studio has made significant strides to create a 50-50 background character ratio between females and males. First things first, I can understand this argument. I really do. Unlike the previous two complaints I brought up, this one can be seen in real time, where we only have two somewhat major female characters in the movie, Astrid and Roughnut. However, that doesn't mean we don't see female Vikings fighting and helping to keep the village from burning down during the This Is Berk scene. It's simply that of the main cast, Hiccup's mother is dead. Well, supposedly.
Spoilers.
And of the 6 kids in the group, 2 of them are girls. Considering that the movie really focuses more on a father-son and boy-dragon relationship, though, I don't think the addition of more female characters in the main cast would have solved any problems. In fact, I don't really think there were any problems to begin with related to this issue, other than it could have been nice to see more female background characters. Nowhere in this movie did we see male Vikings telling female Vikings they couldn't fight just because of their gender. Astrid is essentially a warrior queen, and while Roughnut isn't the sharpest axe in the workshop at times, she's still a decent enough fighter and is incredibly Viking-esque with the twinge of crazy we all know and love.
Plus, you have Tough Nut to compare to, who isn't the sharpest either.
True. And considering how often he and Roughnut get mixed up in Race to the Edge, maybe we should count him too. I could see the argument that Astrid is just as much of a problem since she's a badass female warrior that eventually falls for a boy.
Oh no, how dare she be a teenage girl?
But that sounds to me like, what's the word? Something that modern Hollywood is unable to fathom? Oh, that's right, a multi-dimensional and interesting female character. What a concept. Another common complaint I've seen is that Astrid is just a prize to be won by Hiccup like every other kids movie from the era, but I'd have to disagree here. This falls a bit into the stereotypical plot conversation I have planned for later, but it is relevant to this particular topic. So let's take a look at the next common complaint. You have no idea how many times I've seen the complaint that Astrid is just a prize to be won by Hiccup. Ooh, how it burns me up. I swear the next person to say that to me will be the Chris Rock to my Will Smith.
And she means it too.
Astrid is such a complex character, and I wish we were talking about the TV shows too, because they do an excellent job of fleshing her out more. However, since I'm focusing solely on the first movie right now, I'm going to analyze her based only on that context.
Astrid really deserves her own analysis.
Agreed. When we first see Astrid in the movies, it's almost like she feels sorry for Hiccup. While the other kids jab and jeer at him after he took down Toothless, and subsequently burned down part of the village, but maybe don't mind that. She looks at him with a bit of a pity expression. However, once they get to training and Hiccup begins doing better than her due to his newfound dragon training skills, Astrid becomes immensely jealous. Hiccup, who has minimal natural talent for combat and has never trained as hard as she has, is suddenly beating her. This turns them into what some consider an enemies to lovers arc. I think it's more of a competitors to lovers arc. Book Talk has really ruined the first one for me.
I wouldn't really consider them enemies to lovers. While Astrid was a minor antagonistic force for a brief period, they were never outright enemies. And while her desire for answers that drove her to confront Hiccup in the forest likely sprang from her jealousy and competitive streak, I also believe that she was truly confused and just trying to figure out what was going on just as much. As Astrid said herself,
No one just gets as good as you do, especially you.
Now, we as viewers are very well aware of Hiccup's crush on Astrid, and I think this leads to the misconception that her falling for Hiccup is nothing more than him, quote, getting the girl. However, I don't think he's attracted to Astrid in particular simply because he thinks she looks pretty. Obviously, he thinks she's pretty, but I think he's also attracted to her personality and outward appearance, because she essentially represents everything he wants to be as a Viking: strong, heroic, brave, tough, respected, excellent at combat, just to name a few. The same might be argued for the other Viking kids, but Astrid is the only one that really combines all those traits and matches Hiccup's intelligence. Competitiveness aside, she was the only one in the village to realize Hiccup was up to something when he suddenly started winning in dragon training. Nobody else thought, this is weird. Maybe we should check out why the nerd kid is downing dragons.
yeah, no one else bothered following him into the forest to find out what was going on. They just assumed he was some dragon killing prodigy who suddenly got good one day.
This is what really differentiates her from the stereotypical female prize from a lot of animated and live action movies, especially from that era. Yes, she's pretty, but she's also very talented at many things, is quite honestly a bit of an antagonist towards Hiccup for the first part of the film, and perhaps most importantly, she is flawed. Yes, Hollywood, it is possible to make a good, flawed female character.
We're looking at you, critics of Judy and Zootopia, too.
Oh, don't get me started on that one. One of my favorite things during the movie is watching as she slowly becomes more and more unraveled as Hiccup keeps winning.
Yes, and this was done so well, too. A wonderful example of show don't tell.
This causes her to train harder, but also to take more chances and actively hunt down Hiccup when he becomes suspicious. Her desperation to prove herself by winning the dragon training competition isn't just a competitive streak. I think it's a deep desire to be respected by the community and her peers as a formidable warrior and classic Viking. Additionally, later on in the movie, after Astrid discovers Hiccup's secret about Toothless, she goes through some pretty significant growth to realize that dragons aren't that bad after all. Well, after this, of course.
I am not listening to anything you have to say!
Who could forget that? Also, side note, but Jade's voice acting in this scene is top tier, and no one will convince me otherwise.
But during Romantic Flight, we see her starting to warm up to Hiccup pretty significantly. I think she genuinely respected that he finally told her the truth, and she finally realized that he wasn't the scrawny, useless son of the chief. Hiccup was a complicated, interesting person who was trying to prove himself to the village just like she is. He understood her, and she was finally understanding him. And that, my friends, is why I think she started to fall for him, just a little bit, or at the very least, respect him and view him as an ally and a friend. Showing a little bit of vulnerability or trust can go a long way in a relationship. Then, of course, they discover the Red Death together. Yes, that is its official name, taken from the Green Death antagonist from the books, and go through a pretty traumatic experience that they barely make it out of alive. Afterwards, we get the iconic Cove scene where Hiccup finally stands up for himself and Astrid realizes he's actually serious and committed to what he believes in, therefore earning him more respect and a kiss on the cheek. In my opinion, a very fun little moment. And I don't think Hiccup was actively trying to, quote, get the girl during any of this.
No, not at all.
He was very well aware that Astrid could run home and tell his dad, and he certainly didn't know that Romantic Flight would impress her. He was simply trying to show her, like he eventually did for all the other Burkians, that dragons aren't that bad. As he said,
"Just let me show you. Please, Astrid."
he didn't even want to tell Astrid about Toothless to begin with, because it certainly would have lost him points with her, especially without the Romantic Flight explanation to start changing her mind. After this, we have the scene where Hiccup is almost killed by the monstrous nightmare, and Astrid shows genuine fear for his safety, certainly a first since dragon training started. Then we have the excellent moment where Astrid challenges Hiccup to think critically about why he made the choices he did regarding Toothless, leading to his crazy idea of stopping his dad and defeating the Red Death.
Then something crazy.
That's more like it.
This concept of Astrid acting as a challenge to Hiccup and his beliefs is definitely a running theme throughout the series, but again, that's for a different conversation. Of course, Hiccup defeats the Red Death, and we pan to Astrid who's terrified he's dead, then it turns out he's alive, and then we get to that scene. Yes. I will defend this ship till the day I die, but if I had to state my largest critique for How to Train Your Dragon, it'd be this one. Astrid and Hiccup kiss at the end. Listen, I get it. And honestly, it's deserved after the very good build-up of their relationship throughout the movie. Those two have so much chemistry that I could have suspended my disbelief for a lot worse.
Like for the Nine Realms?
Oh, don't even get me started. Don't you dare compare the amazingness that is Hiccup and Astrid to the terror that is Tom and June.
Okay.
That's what I thought. I also understand that Dean and Chris had no idea there'd be 2 more movies and hours of TV show content to build the relationship, so it makes sense. They needed to give viewers a satisfying ending to what was assumed to be a single movie. Regardless of my disapproval of this scene, I still don't think that it makes Astrid a prize that was won by Hiccup. In addition to everything I mentioned earlier, I'd like to note that she was kind of the one that fell for him out of her own pure choice.
Exactly. Keep in mind that Astrid was the one initiating the kiss with Hiccup, not the other way around. He stood there shocked both times.
Yes, he had a crush on her, but Hiccup did nothing to force her into liking him. Literally, all he did was show her his true self, and I think she liked, and related to, what she saw. Plus, the aforementioned scene was very quick and was nowhere near a classic romantic scene between a protagonist and the girl he gets at the end of the movie after defeating the bad guys. So, in conclusion, no. I don't think that Astrid was a prize for Hiccup to win. She was a genuine character with flaws, desires, development, and depth. Please, I really want more characters like Astrid in Hollywood. I'm desperate for female protagonists who have more dimensions than the non-figurative part of the abstract thought room in Inside Out. Probably the most common argument that I hear against How to Train Your Dragon is that the plot is predictable. So, is the plot cliche, predictable, or too easy? I'm gonna say no. This complaint reminds me a bit of how in Zootopia 2, critics complained that our protagonist found places too easily and that the plot was too convenient, but it never actually felt that way when watching the movie because our characters had so many unique and genuine struggles reaching those locations in the first place. Also, if anyone says that Zootopia 2 is predictable, we clearly did not watch the same movie. I think that instead of following cliche plot points, this movie had something different up its sleeve. Tropes. This movie has a lot of tropes.
Yes, we have the love interest trope between Hiccup and Astrid, the father-son relationship trope, the boy and animal trope, the underdog trope. I think you get the point.
But what really sets this movie apart from others is how it handles these tropes. After all, whether or not a trope feels cliche and predictable comes down to the execution of the story.
Keep in mind that there are only so many ways to handle a plot. Tropes are going to happen whether we like it or not. It's all about the writing.
Exactly. So, let's take a look at some of the common tropes, shall we? I'm going to start by defining the underdog trope as a trope where characters need to overcome low expectations, societal standing, or a lack of skills to achieve victory. Common movies that face this trope would be Kung Fu Panda, Ratatouille, or Encanto, to name a few. And you know what? Those are great movies. However, there are also movies that handle the underdog trope really, really poorly. How to Train Your Dragon, meanwhile, is a movie that I think handles the trope wonderfully. I suppose the question now is, why? One of my favorite things about How to Train Your Dragon is that it will either take a trope and use it really well, or it will take a trope, spin it on its head, and then still use it really well. Hiccup is not your traditional underdog in that he faces a low societal standing. As the chief's son, he's basically like a prince. And honestly, that makes the dynamic even more fascinating because it's almost like he has to try even harder. At this point in his life, Hiccup faces low expectations and that nobody expects much of anything from him. I think this initially stemmed from the fact that he isn't built anything like a normal Viking. Some of the other kids like Toughnut, Roughnut, and Astrid aren't built that way either, but they make up for it in either their warrior skills or overall Vikingness. Hiccup genuinely strikes me as somebody that was simply born in the wrong era.
The fact that he's such a brilliant inventor and kind of a revolutionary further supports this.
Throughout his entire life, he's always faced disappointment from his father and his tribe. Nobody expects great things of him. He's the village screw-up. On that same coin, he also faces a lack of skills to achieve victory, at least in a normal sense, since he's nothing like a quote true Viking and cannot fight his way through a problem. Rather, he has to use his brain and his wits. That's where the writers changed the trope. Alright, I don't want to dish on Hercules because it's a genuinely great film, but I'm inclined to bring it up because they handle the underdog trope rather linearly. Hercules, like Hiccup, doesn't look the part of the hero. They're both constantly screwing things up, almost getting people killed, etc. Hercules, however, is able to go through a change pretty early on that solves his problem. His biggest issue is that he doesn't look the part of strong hero.
But this problem is resolved pretty quickly through a training montage with a banger of a song. This isn't to say that Hercules isn't a good movie. They handle the trope well, and it's not the overarching plotline. However, it is a bit closer to how this particular trope is typically handled in film.
Hiccup, meanwhile, never gets a glow up, at least in this film. Instead, he slowly discovers that he can overcome the low expectations by using his mental prowess and wit to get around the issue. There is significant evidence of this in the film. Just look at any of the dragon training scenes. He learns that Toothless is scared of eels, so he finds a way to discreetly hide one under his coat so that it's not immediately suspicious but keeps him from getting eaten. He discovers that Toothless enjoys rolling in the grass, or dragon nip, and is able to use it to stop a Gronkle attack. He also combines the use of a dragon's blind spot with knowing the sensitive parts of the body to, quote, take down the Natter, later known as Stormfly, before Astrid can hurt her. I think the best example of Hiccup's unique intelligence is at the end of the film. Right after the test drive scene, we get a supposedly simple clip where he learns that everything he's been taught about dragons is wrong, and that terrible terrors, or dragons in general,
Not so fireproof on the inside, are you?
this concept is what he eventually uses to defeat the Red Death at the end of the movie. He has no idea if it'll work, but he observes the world around him and is always finding clever ways to use simple things at his disposal to get out of tricky situations. This is highlighted a lot in the TV shows, particularly Race to the Edge.
And this is another thing that drove us crazy about the live action. This scene was completely cut, which means Hiccup had no way of knowing that Toothless blasting the Red Death in the mouth would do anything. He just assumed and then lucked out.
At the end of the day, this movie does use the underdog trope heavily, but it does so in an interesting way, and I've not seen it repeated in any other animated kids' movies. He's the son of the chief, but he's nothing physically or mentally like the other Vikings. Hiccup needs to find his own way in the movie to become a true member of the tribe, and he doesn't do it by conforming to the Viking way.
Which he renounces in the monstrous nightmare scene, by the way.
Instead, he finds belonging and acceptance by being different than everyone else. By the end of the movie, he successfully realized that his self-worth doesn't come from being the biggest, toughest Viking in town. It's something that only he can decide, and he decides that the best way to fit in is by being his true self, not by pretending to be something he's not. You can't even try to deny this one. They literally have a song, an entire sequence named after it. Ugh, now I want to go watch it again. This is one of my top 3 favorite scenes from the movie. Oh, we should totally...
Focus, North.
Right, sorry. Okay, normally when you see the forbidden friendship trope in a movie, it's between 2 people who are from different cultures. Some random examples I can think of off the top of my head, including movies with forbidden romance, would be The Fox and the Hound, The Secret World of Ariete, Pocahontas, Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Tarzan, The Iron Giant, Shrek to some extent, and Romeo and Juliet. Oh, and also literally any movie with the small town rivalry trope. This is a pretty extensive list, and there's so many more movies I haven't even mentioned. So obviously, this is a pretty common trope. What makes How to Train Your Dragon different? I originally wanted to note a difference that the dragons have killed a lot of Vikings, but I'm slowly remembering that similar things happened in some of the movies above. Now, is what the dragons have done more violent? Yes, it's an excellent reason for conflict. So I think the biggest difference is this: Toothless cannot talk. Hiccup is left entirely on his own to defend his new friend to other Vikings. I suppose something similar can be said for the Fox and the Hound, since the 2 protagonists can't really talk to humans, but they can actively talk to each other. So as always, the directors put an interesting spin on this trope, and I think that's part of why it makes it unique rather than monotonous and predictable. Since Toothless cannot defend himself verbally, he can't just sit down and have a conversation. It's not even like some petty rivalry. The Vikings are actively trying to kill the dragons and vice versa during the raids. It's not like the dragons can walk up to Stoic's door and go,
"Oh, hey, sorry we killed you and stole your food. It's only 'cause we'll get eaten ourselves if we don't."
and then the Vikings go, "It's all right, buddy. I totally understand. Let's make up and be friends." No.
The dragons aren't defenseless in a physical strength way, but they are still defenseless in a sense. It's only by having a human spokesperson that their side can be understood. Also, the implications of Stoke discovering Hiccup fraternizing with the dragons are way more dangerous than normal movie stakes.
Exactly. Typically, your protagonists will just get split apart in a third act conflict, especially with this trope, and not be allowed to see each other again until they make up at the end of the movie. But no. Here, Toothless is as good as dead if Stoic finds out about him.
The only reason Stoic didn't kill Toothless is because he needed to use him to find the dragon nest. And for Hiccup, being discovered would essentially cement him as a social outcast for the rest of his life.
To be honest, the other Vikings would probably find a way to get rid of him since they'd assume his ideas would be a danger to the tribe. So, is it a common movie trope? Yes. However, in my opinion, it's done exceedingly well and really raises the stakes. There is a legitimate danger to the forbidden friendship between Toothless and Hiccup being discovered. And with the added twist that Toothless can't even talk to defend himself or dragonkind, it really is a new, insightful way to use the trope to the advantage of the story. Phew, that was a long one. Let's check the time here. It's probably only been like 15 minutes, so... Well, I'm scared to see how much longer the Hidden World video will be, because I have a lot more to say about that one. Before we go, I want to emphasize something. I am not forcing you to like this movie.
Actually, she might be.
Yeah, that's true, I probably would. But I simply wanted to share my thoughts on common complaints I've seen online and in other YouTube videos. I also try to give evidence and justification to come to logical conclusions as to why, to put it plainly, the critics are wrong. This film is a masterclass in everything from character growth and development to using common tropes in a new and insightful way.
For a movie with such a troubled early production, they really did an excellent job pulling the film together cohesively.
And I completely agree. So, if you haven't seen the movie yet, give it a watch. And if you have seen the movie already, watch it again. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and follow for more movie analysis content.